He said I wasn't in his league. He said marrying me was settling. Now, the man who was once my entire world is standing outside my gate, desperate for the one thing he threw away. He was right about one thing: we aren't in the same league, but he was terribly mistaken about who was looking down. My name is Eliza, and I am 34 years old. The tapered candles were burning low, their wax pooling on the mahogany dining table I had polished just that morning. I was carefully rearranging the silverware for the third time, stalling. The truffle risotto, the one that had taken me 3 hours of constant stirring, was slowly congealing in its serving dish. It was supposed to be a celebration. My celebration. I had won the Keystone Award, a national design prize for the pro bono campaign I'd built for a local animal shelter. It was the biggest moment of my career. My husband, Marcus, came home at 10 o'clock, 4 hours late. He didn't even take off his trench coat. He was 36, a senior financial analyst, and his eyes were glued to the blue light of his phone as he brushed past the elaborate table I'd set. He went straight to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. I kept the smile fixed on my face, though it felt brittle. "Marcus, honey, you're here. I was waiting so we could celebrate." He twisted the cap off the bottle and let out a sigh. Not a sigh of relief, but of profound exhaustion, as if my voice were the final burden of his long day. "Eliza, can you just stop trying for 1 second?" he said, not looking up from his screen. "I'm in the middle of my VP review. Your little art prize doesn't really matter right now." The words hit me with a physical force. Little art prize. I felt the air leave my lungs. He must have sensed my silence, because he finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "From now on, I'll decide when we talk. Stop following me around like some puppy." I just stood there, speechless. The aroma of truffle and parmesan, which had filled the house with such promise, now just smelled like rot. He wasn't finished. He took a step toward me, his expression one of pure, unfiltered disdain. "Honestly, I can't believe I ever settled for you." He gestured vaguely at the table. At me. "Your $65,000 salary and that worthless award. You have never been, and you will never be, anywhere near my league." He turned and walked into his home office. I listened as the heavy door shut, followed by the sharp, definitive click of the lock. It sounded just like a verdict. I didn't cry. I stood perfectly still in the flickering candlelight. The sharp, hot sting of humiliation didn't dissolve into tears. It did something else. It cooled, then crystallized, hardening inside my chest into something cold, clear, and unbreakable. A decision had been made. With a strange, calm emptiness, I began to clear the table. I picked up the heavy Le Creuset pot, the one I'd saved for months to buy, and walked it to the kitchen sink. I scraped the entire pot of risotto, all 3 hours of my effort, into the garbage disposal. The rich, creamy sound it made as the blades churned it into gray slurry was deeply, terribly satisfying. Next, I picked up the $150 bottle of wine I had bought for us. I uncorked it, not to drink, but to dispose of. I poured it steadily down the sink, watching the deep red liquid swirl and disappear. It smelled of dark cherries and betrayal. I blew out each candle, one by one, until the room was plunged into the sterile light of the kitchen fluorescents. I washed our wedding china, the expensive plates we never used, and dried them carefully. Then, instead of putting them back in the dining room hutch, I packed them away in a cardboard box in the pantry. I knew I would never use them again. I went upstairs, bypassing our bedroom, and went into the guest room. I closed the door, and I locked it. The next morning, I was up at 5 a.m. The alarm on my phone was quiet, a gentle vibration. I dressed in the dark. Downstairs, I made coffee. 1 cup. I toasted a single piece of sourdough and scrambled 1 egg. Marcus emerged at 7:30, his hair messy, his suit for the day already draped over his arm. He blinked, clearly disoriented by the silent, clean kitchen and the absence of his usual routine. "Where's my coffee?" he demanded. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. I was already in my work clothes, blazer on, portfolio by my feet. I sipped my own coffee, looking at him over the rim of the mug. "Oh, I assumed you'd be handling that from now on," I said, my voice light, pleasant. "I wouldn't want my sub-league service to bother you." I watched the confusion in his eyes curdle into a dark, familiar anger. But before he could formulate a response, I picked up my bag. "Have a good day at the office," I said, smiling politely, as if he were a stranger I'd just passed in the lobby. I walked out the front door and left him standing there. That night, after he had retreated to his office with another locked door and a takeout bag, I sat in the guest room with my laptop. I opened a new private browser window and opened a high-yield savings account at a bank he had no affiliation with. I did it under my maiden name, Eliza Vance. Then, I opened a new encrypted document. I started a journal. I typed his exact words from the night before, the ones seared into my memory. "Honestly, I can't believe I ever settled for you. You have never been, and you will never be, anywhere near my league." I logged the date and the time. It was the first of many entries. In the cold silence of the guest room, the past didn't just knock, it broke the door down. That new, hard thing in my chest, the decision I'd made, demanded evidence, and the memories provided it, in sharp, brutal flashes. I remembered, 5 years ago, quitting my second job, the one bartending on weekends that I secretly loved, so I could be home to make his dinners and quiz him with flashcards while he studied for his CFA exams. I'd been so proud to support him, to be part of the team. He'd passed all 3 levels in a row, a notoriously difficult feat, and I had genuinely believed his success was my own. I remembered using my own savings, the money I'd inherited from my grandmother, to cover our rent for 6 solid months while he took an unpaid internship at Blackwood Capital. It was nearly $10,000, my entire nest egg. He had kissed me, his eyes bright with ambition, and called me his platform. He said, "I'm building my empire from this platform. Eliza, you're my rock." Now, he called me a liability. He called me settling. The small slights, the ones I had papered over with excuses, came back in horrifying clarity. The dinner parties where he would hold court, explaining complex derivatives to his banker friends, and would pat my hand and say, "Eliza makes things look pretty. She's the artist." He'd called my work doodling more times than I could count, comparing my 60-hour work weeks on a major campaign to him running the world. I had always laughed it off, telling myself he just didn't understand the creative world, that his financial brain was too linear. I had been a fool. The most damning memory surfaced, one from just a few months ago. He'd found one of my personal sketchbooks. It was filled with ideas for a personal project, a new app interface I was designing, exploring UI/UX concepts. I'd found him flipping through it in the kitchen, a smirk on his face. "This is naive, babe," he'd said, tapping the glass of his phone. "This flow is completely unrealistic. It's not how users actually think. It's cute, but it's not a real-world product." He'd tossed the book back on the counter, dismissing years of my professional expertise with a single condescending gesture. He'd called my ideas cute, and I had let him. I had actually felt ashamed, closing the book and putting it away, as if my work were some childish secret. Last night wasn't an aberration. It wasn't the VP stress talking. The contempt I saw in his eyes had been there all along, hiding behind a mask of ambitious gratitude. He hadn't just become this man. He had simply finally given himself permission to be this man. Out loud, I had spent years justifying his growing arrogance as work stress, his coldness as focus. The truth was simpler and so much uglier. He didn't respect me. He never respected my work. He saw me as the infrastructure, the scaffolding he could stand on to build his real life, and now that he was close to the top, he was ready to kick it all away. This realization didn't make me sad. It made me cold. My resolve hardened from a decision into a strategy. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting a man who had been lying to me, stealing my support and my savings and my time. Since the day he first called me his platform, all the energy I had wasted trying to anticipate his moods, the frantic mental gymnastics of trying to please a man who refused to be pleased. It was a humming, toxic current inside me. Now, it had nowhere to go. I decided to aim it. I started by reinvesting it in the place he hated most, my work. I walked into Synapse Creative the next morning. I didn't go to my desk. I went straight to Chloe's office. Chloe, our creative lead, was a whirlwind of neon-dyed hair and infectious energy, the living antithesis of Marcus's gray and steel world. "Hey," I said, leaning on her doorframe. "I'm late telling you this, but I won the Keystone Award." Chloe, who had been sketching frantically, froze. Her pen hovered. "You what?" "The Keystone, for the shelter campaign." She stared at me for 1 second, and then she screamed. It was not a polite sound. It was a full-bodied, joyous shriek that made the junior designers in the bullpen jump. "The Keystone, Eliza. That's national. Why didn't you say anything before I could even invent a lie?" She was on her feet, grabbing my hand and pulling me into the center of the office. "Attention!" she yelled, clapping her hands. "Our own Eliza Vance won the goddamn Keystone Award, and she didn't tell us." The office exploded. People were clapping, whistling. My art director ran over and lifted me in a hug. It was chaos. Within 10 minutes, Chloe had canceled the remaining meetings for the day and was herding everyone toward the elevators. "We are celebrating," she announced, flashing the company credit card. "Drinks, now, on Synapse." As I sat in a crowded bistro at 3 in the afternoon, laughing so hard I almost cried, surrounded by people who were genuinely, loudly proud of me, the relief was a physical sensation. It felt like taking off a coat that was 5 sizes too small. This was what it was supposed to feel like. This was my league. But the anger was still there, a low thrum beneath the joy. It needed a physical voice. Marcus had always mocked my yoga classes, calling it competitive stretching and asking if finding my center helped pay the bills. So I did something else. I signed up for a Krav Maga class. The gym was in a basement. It smelled of rubber, antiseptic, and old sweat. There were no meditation bowls, only gray mats and padded walls. Our instructor, Sasha, was a compact woman with dead eyes and a voice like gravel. She didn't care about our feelings. She cared about our posture. She pushed us to our limits and then passed them. The physical pain was a glorious distraction from the grinding glass misery in my head. I learned how to block a punch, how to break a chokehold, how to drive my heel into a knee. The first time I slammed my palm into the heavy pad, the impact rattled up my arm and settled something deep in my chest. I was sore in places I didn't know I had muscles. "Stop trying to push him," Sasha barked at me during one session as I struggled against a partner twice my size. "You're fighting his strength. You'll lose every time." She grabbed my arm to demonstrate. "He comes at you. Let him. Absorb it." She moved with a frightening fluidity. "Find your opening and use their momentum against them. Let them fall from their own weight." I stopped, breathing hard, the sweat stinging my eyes. Use their momentum against them. The phrase stuck. It became my mantra. I whispered it as I fell asleep in the guest room. I thought it when I saw Marcus's car in the driveway. I was learning how to take a hit, and I was learning how to pivot. That physical strength, the bruises on my shins and the new power in my shoulders began to seep inward. I was forging something new, and it was hard, and it was sharp. The new, sharp version of me needed a plan. The old, soft Eliza would have confronted him, crying, holding the burnt risotto. The new one made an appointment during her lunch hour. I told Chloe I had an emergency dental visit. Instead, I took the subway downtown to the offices of Anya Sharma. Her firm was all glass and minimalist steel, overlooking the city from the 42nd floor. Anya herself was not warm. She was a blade in a perfectly tailored suit. She didn't offer me coffee or water. She offered me a chair and silence. "You have 1 hour," she said, her eyes already on the clock. I didn't waste time. I pushed my phone across the desk, open to the encrypted journal I had been keeping. "It starts 3 weeks ago." I also handed her the printed statements from my new bank account. She read, her face expressionless. Her sharp, dark eyes scanned the lines of text, my meticulous records of his cruelty. She didn't flinch, not even at his most brutal words. She just absorbed. When she finished, she looked up at me, her gaze analytical, not sympathetic. "And you supported him financially?" she asked. "I quit my second job so he could study for the CFA exams. I made flashcards, I quizzed him, I ran the household entirely. Then I used my inheritance, almost $10,000, to pay our rent for 6 months while he did an unpaid internship at Blackwood Capital." Anya leaned back, the first trace of something not warmth, but keen interest in her eyes. "Good," she said. "That is very good. His career is not just his. His earning potential, that VP promotion he's so obsessed with, is a marital asset. Your support, your money, was a direct investment in that asset. We argue that you own a significant piece of it." "So what's the next step?" I asked, feeling the first real flicker of hope. "The next step is nothing," she replied, confusing me. "Not yet. Right now. He thinks you are a petulant child throwing a tantrum in the guest room. This is an advantage. We let him think that. We don't file. We gather. I want the last 5 years of tax returns, joint and personal. I want every credit card statement, every brokerage account, every bonus. He thinks you're beneath him. Good. He won't see you coming. His office at home is locked," I said. "He changed the passcode." Anya just looked at me. "You're the one who ran his entire life for a decade. Eliza. You prepared those taxes every year. I'm confident you'll find what we need." I went home that night. Marcus was out, a late client dinner he'd announced to the guest room door. The house was cold and still. I stood in front of his locked office. He was right. The electronic keypad was new. But he'd forgotten one thing. He'd forgotten that I was the one who designed the entire home office, including the custom built-in bookshelves, and I was the one who insisted the contractor install a manual key override, hidden behind a false panel in the wainscoting, just in case the electronics failed. I retrieved the key, and the lock clicked open with a soft, expensive sound. The room smelled like him arrogant, expensive cologne, and stale coffee. I went straight to the filing cabinet. I had organized this cabinet myself. I knew exactly where the tax files were. I started pulling them out, folder by folder, laying them on the floor to photograph each page with my phone for Anya. As I reached for the last file, my fingers brushed against something hard tucked deep in the back of the drawer, behind the hanging files. It was a black leather notebook, a moleskin. I had never seen it before. My heart began to beat in a slow, heavy rhythm. This wasn't a tax ledger. This was new. I sat in his chair, the leather groaning under my weight, and opened the first page. I couldn't breathe. It was my sketchbook, not my actual book, but my ideas, copied with a meticulous, sterile precision. My UI/UX concepts, the app interface, the naive user flow he had laughed at. There were my sketches, line for line, and on the opposite pages, in his sharp, angular handwriting, were notes, business plans, revenue models, 5-year projections, and at the top of the page, a name for his new startup, Aperture Insights. The room tilted. The cold, hard thing in my chest wasn't a decision anymore. It was rage, pure and clean as ice. He hadn't just dismissed my work. He hadn't just looked down on me. He was stealing from me. He was building his entire escape plan, his next-level career, on the very ideas he'd called cute and unrealistic. He'd said he'd settled by marrying me. The irony was suffocating. He hadn't settled by marrying me. He had lowered himself to the level of a common thief by stealing my intellectual property. He wasn't in another league. He wasn't even playing the same sport. He was just a cheat. My withdrawal from his life was not a loud, dramatic exit. It was a silent removal of services. And it turned out, the man who was running the world couldn't run his own household. I watched, with the detached curiosity of a scientist, as his meticulously ordered life began to fray at the edges. His expensive suits, the ones he saw as armor, began to pile up on the chair in his bedroom. The dry cleaning, which I used to drop off every Tuesday and pick up every Thursday, sat in its hamper, untouched. The man who had once lectured me for 10 minutes about using the wrong kind of starch was now, I observed, wearing a visibly wrinkled shirt to a client meeting. The kitchen, his showpiece of granite and stainless steel, became a testament to his unraveling. I continued to make my single cup of coffee, my single portion meals, and washed my single plate. His side of the sink, however, became a skyline of greasy fast food boxes and stacked delivery containers. The man who insisted on only organic, locally sourced produce was now apparently subsisting on cold pizza and lukewarm pad thai. The recycling bin overflowed with beer bottles and energy drink cans. One morning, I heard a frantic series of thumps and curses coming from his room. I was on my way out, my gym bag over my shoulder, when he burst into the hallway, his face red and his hair uncombed. "Where is it?" he yelled. I paused, one hand on the newel post. Where is what? Marcus. My tie, my lucky tie, the blue one with the silver stripes. Where is it? I looked at him blankly. I have no idea. I haven't done your laundry in 3 weeks. He stared at me as if I'd just confessed to a murder. But it's my meeting, the final VP review. You know I wear that tie. That sounds stressful, I said, my voice empty of all emotion. I hope you find it. I left him there, ripping his closet apart. He also missed his 6-month dental cleaning, an appointment I had booked for him 8 months in advance because his schedule was just that important. The receptionist called my phone, the number he'd listed as his primary contact, to ask where he was. I'm sorry, I told her. I'm no longer his assistant. You'll have to call his office. He was starting to look it, too. The polished VP look was cracking. Dark circles, like faint bruises, were forming under his eyes. His skin looked sallow. The sheer energy it took to be Marcus, a man who believed himself to be a self-made titan, was clearly enormous, and he was running out of fuel. The inevitable confrontation came on a Wednesday night. I was heading out to my Krav Maga class. I'd just locked the guest room door when he stepped out of his office, blocking the hallway. He looked terrible. He looked like I felt 3 weeks ago. Eliza, what is this game? He demanded, his voice low and ragged. I'm tired of it. It's childish. I stood still, my gym bag a solid weight on my shoulder. I looked him directly in the eye, my gaze steady. This isn't a game, Marcus. I kept my voice calm, almost placid. I'm respecting your boundaries. You said, and I quote, from now on, I'll decide when we talk. I'm just waiting for your decision. A dark flush of rage crept up his neck. He was trapped. His own arrogant words, the ones he'd used to put me in my place, were now a cage he'd built for himself. He had all the power. He was in the league above me, which meant the next move had to be his. But making that move meant admitting he needed something from me. His pride and his anger were at war, and it was fascinating to watch. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no response. Excuse me, I said, moving to sidestep him. I'm going to be late for my class. I brushed past him, close enough to smell the stale coffee on his breath. I walked down the stairs, opened the front door, and stepped out into the cool night air. I was halfway down the walkway when I heard it. A dull, heavy thud that vibrated through the house. The sound of a fist, a very expensive fist, connecting with drywall. I didn't even smile. I just kept walking. My phone began to buzz. I was at my desk at Synapse, storyboarding a new client project, and the vibration was sharp against the wood. I glanced at the screen. Marcus. I pressed the button on the side, sending him to voicemail, and kept drawing. It buzzed again immediately, and again. I silenced my phone completely. When I checked it an hour later, there were 12 missed calls. Then the text messages started. The first was a command disguised as an apology. Okay, I'm sorry. You win. Just come home. I ignored it. I went to a meeting with Chloe. When I came out, a new text was waiting. The tone had already shifted. Eliza, you're acting like a child. This is ridiculous. Stop this. By the end of the day, as I was packing my gym bag, the final one came through. The desperation was acidic, palpable. You're ruining us. You're ruining everything. What the hell is wrong with you? I didn't feel anger or fear or even satisfaction. I felt a cold sense of confirmation. I meticulously screenshotted every single message and the log of his frantic, unanswered calls. I attached them to a new email and sent them to Anya Sharma. The subject line was simple documentation. October 23rd. That night, I didn't go to the gym. I had a different kind of research to do. I sat in the guest room and opened my laptop, the black leather notebook beside me. Aperture Insights. My job isn't just drawing. It's research. It's understanding user behavior, finding patterns, and digging into the hidden architecture of a system. I didn't just type the name into a search bar. That would be an amateur move. I started searching for new domain registries. I searched for holding companies registered under his name, or his mother's. Nothing. He was a finance guy, not a developer. He would have hired a firm to build his prototype. That firm would have a staging server, a hidden website where they would post the beta for client review. I started searching for the name Aperture Insights combined with industry terms like beta, staging, client portal, and V1. It took me 2 hours. 2 hours of digging through cached pages and obscure developer forums. And then I found it. A subdomain, unindexed by Google, hidden. It was password protected. He was arrogant. He thought I was stupid. I tried his mother's maiden name, Invalid. I tried our anniversary, Invalid. Then I tried the ticker symbol for Blackwood Capital. Access granted. The page loaded. My heart, which I thought had turned to stone, hammered against my ribs. It wasn't just a concept. It was a fully functional, beautifully designed demo of a revolutionary financial analysis app. The interface was sleek, intuitive, and complex. It was brilliant, and it was mine. I clicked through the demo, my hands shaking. The user onboarding flow, the dashboard layout, the data visualization tools. It wasn't just inspired by my sketchbook. It was a pixel-for-pixel recreation of my naive and unrealistic designs. He hadn't just stolen the concept. He had taken my sketchbook and handed it directly to a team of developers. My breath caught in my throat. I navigated to the About Us page. There were 2 founders listed. Marcus, with a smug corporate headshot, was listed as Chief Executive Officer, and beside him, listed as co-founder and Chief Technology Officer, was a woman named Serena Davies. I recognized her instantly. A high-flying, ice-blonde partner at Blackwood Capital. The woman Marcus had mentioned constantly, the one he always insisted was just a mentor, the one he had late-night strategy sessions with, the woman who was, by every metric he valued, absolutely in his league. The entire horrifying picture snapped into focus. The truth was so much worse than I had imagined. He hadn't just stolen my ideas for himself. He had stolen them to impress her. He had taken my intellectual property, my work, my talent, and presented it as a dowry to this other woman to secure her as a partner. He had used my mind to buy his way into the world he told me I wasn't good enough for. My little art prize wasn't just worthless to him. It was a resource to be plundered, a stepping stone to get to her. The rage I felt was no longer hot. It was absolute zero. It was a pure, silent, crystalline clarity. This was no longer an emotional divorce. This was grand larceny. This was calculated, corporate theft. This was war. I picked up my phone. It was almost midnight. I dialed Anya Sharma's direct line, the one she'd given me for emergencies. She answered on the second ring, her voice instantly sharp and awake. "Anya," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "It's Eliza. We need to change the plan." I stared at the screen, at my designs sitting above Serena Davies's name. "We're not just divorcing," I said. "We're suing." It was 5 o'clock on a Friday. The week had been a blur of affidavits, spreadsheets, and late-night strategy calls with Anya. I was exhausted, but for the first time in years, it was a productive, satisfying exhaustion. Chloe and I were walking out of the elevator, laughing about a client's absurd request, when I saw him, Marcus. He was standing in the middle of the Synapse Creative Lobby, a space he had never once set foot in. He didn't belong here. This space was all bright colors, exposed brick, and creative chaos. He was Wall Street gray, but today, he wasn't. He looked insane. He wasn't wearing one of his custom-tailored suits. He was in a wrinkled wool sweater I hadn't seen in years, and his hair was sticking up in damp, frantic peaks. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. And in his hand, he was clutching a massive funereal bouquet of white stargazer lilies. I am violently allergic to lilies. The moment he saw me, his face crumpled in a grotesque mask of relief. "Eliza," he shouted, running toward me. He actually ran. The entire lobby went silent. The receptionist, the security guard, a team of designers waiting for the elevator. Everyone froze. Chloe grabbed my arm, her own smile vanishing. "Eliza, thank God," he said, breathing hard as he stopped a few feet in front of me. He smelled sour. "I've been trying to call you. I've been so worried." I just looked at him. The man who had locked me out of his office, who had called me subleague, was now ambushing me at my own workplace, holding a weaponized bouquet of pollen. "Marcus," I said, my voice coming out perfectly flat, perfectly cold. "What are you doing here?" "I'm sorry," he announced, his voice echoing in the sudden, vast silence of the atrium. He was performing, I realized, for the audience he had created. "I'm an idiot, a complete idiot. The VP pressure. Serena, she doesn't mean anything. It all just got on top of me. I need you. I need you to come home." I looked at his desperate, bloodshot eyes. I looked at the lilies that would have sent me to the emergency room. I looked at the shocked faces of my colleagues, the people who had celebrated my Keystone win. "You need me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Or do you need your free housekeeper, your unpaid personal assistant?" I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear the venom. "Or do you just need more ideas for Aperture Insights?" The color drained from his face. It didn't just go pale, it went a waxy, grayish white. He looked like he'd been shot. The performance, the frantic apology, it all evaporated. He knew. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. "Finally," he hissed, his eyes darting to the security guard. Don't do this here." He lunged forward and tried to grab my hand. I recoiled. It wasn't a flinch. It was a block, a pivot, just like Sasha had taught me. I stepped back, out of his reach, and the movement was so sharp and sudden that he was left grabbing at empty air. I looked at him, no longer as my husband, but as a failed experiment. "You said I wasn't in your league," I said, my voice clear and carrying now, for everyone to hear. "You were right. I'm not, and I will not be dragged down to the league of a common thief." I saw Chloe's eyes widen, but I never looked away from Marcus. "I've moved out," I said. Do not contact me again. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. I turned, my back to him. Come on, Chloe. Let's get that drink. I didn't look back as we walked toward the glass doors. I could feel the weight of his stare, the stunned, horrified silence of the entire lobby burning into my shoulder blades. I heard a muffled sound, a clatter, as the enormous, expensive bouquet of the wrong flowers slipped from his hand and hit the marble floor. We just kept walking. On Monday morning, I was at my desk at 7 a.m. Anya Sharma, I learned, did not wait for the start of business. At precisely 9:01 a.m., a legal courier walked onto the trading floor at Blackwood Capital. It was the peak of the morning bell, a chaotic symphony of shouting and ringing phones. The courier, unmoved, walked directly to Marcus's new, prominent desk, the one he'd been given in anticipation of his promotion. In front of 50 of his peers, he served Marcus with divorce papers. The charge was not irreconcilable differences. It was dissipation of marital assets and gross financial misconduct. Simultaneously, 3 blocks away, another courier was handing a thick priority envelope to the executive assistant of Serena Davies. It was not a divorce filing. It was a cease and desist letter from Anya's intellectual property division. It meticulously detailed the timeline of my copyrighted designs, the date of the beta website's registration, and the undeniable, traceable theft of my IP. It informed Ms. Davies that she was now party to a significant federal crime. My own moves were quieter. I had already, over the weekend, moved all my essential items out of the house. I had signed a lease on a small, secure penthouse apartment in a different neighborhood, one with a doorman and keycard elevators. I'd had my personal mail forwarded, and that Monday morning, I activated a new phone with a new number. The only people who had it were my parents, Chloe and Anya. My old phone, the one Marcus was still frantically calling and texting, was sitting in a drawer in Anya's office, its battery dying, cataloged as evidence. The fallout was immediate. The first call came not to my phone, of course, but to my office landline at Synapse. The receptionist buzzed me, her voice hesitant. Eliza, there's a Fiona Vance on the line for you. She sounds very upset. Fiona, his older sister. She had always been kind to me, in a pitying sort of way. I took the call. Eliza. Oh, thank God, she was sobbing, just as I'd heard her sob. What are you doing? Marcus just called me. He's hysterical. He said you're ruining his life. He said you filed for divorce and you're telling everyone he stole something, Eliza. This is a mistake. It has to be some small misunderstanding. You can't just destroy his career over a fight. I listened, my hand steady on the receiver. The old me would have been apologizing, trying to smooth things over, trying to manage Fiona's feelings. Fiona, I said, my voice calm and low. I appreciate you calling, but this is not a misunderstanding. But he loves you, Eliza. He's just under so much stress. You know how he gets. Please, just talk to him. I can't do that, I said. But I will send you something, so you understand what's happening. What is your email address? She gave it to me, still crying, still begging me to reconsider. I hung up. I opened a new email. I attached 3 things. First, my original time-stamped design files from my computer. Second, the screenshots of the Aperture Insights website, clearly showing Serena's name next to my stolen work. And third, I attached an audio file. I lived in a one-party consent state. I had started recording my interactions with Marcus weeks ago. This file was from the night he'd found my sketchbook, the night he had laughed and called my ideas naive and cute. I sent the email with no subject and no body text. 5 minutes passed. My office line rang again. It was Fiona. Her voice was unrecognizable. The hysteria was gone, replaced by a flat, cold shock. Oh my God, she whispered. That's your work. He was laughing at... Oh my God, Eliza, he's a monster. I know, I said. Don't worry, she said, her voice hardening. I'm calling Mom and Dad. They're going to know exactly what he did. The support system he had always relied on, the family that had always enabled his arrogance, evaporated in a single afternoon. The final blow came on Thursday. I received a short, curt email from Anya. "Call me." I stepped into a conference room. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I could hear the smile in her voice. "A little bird at Blackwood Capitol just informed me that your husband and Ms. Davies have been placed on indefinite administrative leave. An internal investigation has been launched into ethical misconduct and misuse of company property. It seems your husband was foolish enough to use his Blackwood email servers to develop his little side project. They own all of it. His VP promotion, needless to say, has been permanently suspended." It was a month later. I was walking home from my Krav Maga class just after 8 p.m. The good, clean ache in my muscles, a welcome reminder of my own strength. I felt strong. I felt tired. And I felt free. I turned the corner onto my new street, a quiet, high-security block, and I saw him. He was waiting. Not just waiting, lumbering, outside the heavy black steel gate of my apartment building. I almost didn't recognize him. He must have lost 20 pounds, his face gaunt and hollowed out. He was unshaven, a patchy, desperate-looking beard clinging to his face. The expensive suit he wore was rumpled and stained, as if he'd been sleeping in it for a week. He was the very picture of ruin. He saw me, and his eyes, bloodshot and frantic, widened. "Eliza!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. He ran to the gate, grabbing the bars with both hands as I approached with my key fob. "Eliza, please, you have to stop this." The electronic lock beeped, acknowledging me, but I didn't enter. I let the gate stay shut and turned to face him, the cold steel separating us. "Stop what, Marcus?" I asked. "Stop living my life." "They suspended me," he cried, his voice cracking. "I'm suspended indefinitely. Serena won't talk to me. She's trying to blame me for everything. My family won't even take my calls. You took everything from me. Everything." I looked at this collapsed version of the man who had, just a few weeks ago, told me I wasn't in his league. "I didn't take anything from you, Marcus. I just took back what was mine. You told me to stop following you around like a puppy, so I did. This is just the fallout." His eyes were wild. This was the moment of pure animal panic. He was actually shaking the bars. "I'll give you anything," he pleaded. "Listen to me, I'll give you the house. All of it. I'll give you half my bonus. Half the stupid startup just call them retract the IP suit. Tell Blackwood it was a misunderstanding. Just a nasty fight between us. Tell them it's not true. Please. Eliza. I'm begging you." He was still bargaining. He still thought he held a single card. He still didn't understand. "You really don't get it," I said, my voice soft with a terrible final pity. I pulled out my new phone. I opened my email and tapped on the top message, one I had received from Anya an hour ago. I held the bright screen up to the bars, illuminating his ruined face in the darkness. "You think this is a negotiation," I said. "He thinks we're negotiating." He squinted, trying to read the text. "That's a settlement offer. Marcus, my final one. You're not giving me half of Aperture. You are transferring 100% of your shares, all patents, and all intellectual property rights to me as damages for your theft. You will waive all rights to the house, and you will pay my legal fees. In exchange," I let the words hang in the cold night air, "I will not forward my evidence, including the server logs showing you and Serena used Blackwood's property to build your prototype, to the Securities and Exchange Commission." I lowered the phone. His hands, which had been gripping the bars, slid down. His face was gray. He knew. Checkmate. "This isn't an offer, Marcus," I said. "It's your surrender." I turned my back on him and raised my fob to the sensor. "You told me I'd crawl back," I said, over my shoulder, not giving him the dignity of a final look. "Look who's begging outside my gate." The heavy lock buzzed, and the gate clicked open. I stepped inside, into the warm, bright lobby. I didn't look back as the heavy steel gate slid closed with a soft, final thud, leaving him alone on the outside, in the dark. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's chat about your own thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you really loved it, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.